And it is began. All right, and now the judges will introduce themselves.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Petra Al-Sufi, and I'm the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, a research and education organization that research American Muslims and other faith communities. I'm also on the board of the Michigan Center for Civic Education. And many years ago, I was in your place as a student participant in We the People program. So this is me, your future, telling you you'll survive this. As stressful as it is today, you'll be fine, and you'll remember it, and hopefully it'll inspire you to continue to do public service and civic education work.
So technology allows me to be in a different time zone than you. We're still morning and where I'm at, but I will say good afternoon to Virginia. My name is Dan Wong. I'm a retired attorney and former judge. I'm on the National Board of Directors for the Center for Civic Education. I live in Boise, Idaho. I'm very excited to listen to your testimony and presentation today. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Garnett. I am here in Richmond also. I am currently a policy advisor for the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services. Prior to that, I was a nonpartisan policy analyst, and I evaluated the performance of government programs for the Virginia General Assembly. This is my third year of involvement with We the People. I am very jealous of all of you being involved as students. When I was in high school in Dallas, Texas, I had no idea that this existed. So really cherish this experience, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say today.
Hi, judges. I'm Venna Flournoy.
I'm Sonia Stacia.
And I'm Justin Goldman, and we're Unit 6 from Maggie L. Walker Governor School in Richmond, Virginia, and we're coached by Mr. Sam Olbschneider.
All right, welcome students. I'm gonna go ahead and read your question for you, and then you'll have 4 minutes to give your opening statement. So President Dwight Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." Do you agree or disagree, and why? What disagreement did the founders have about a standing army, and are they relevant today? And to what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence?
In his first address to Congress in 1790, George Washington argued, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace." However, from the very start of our nation, the size and operations of our armed forces have been highly contested.
Following trials such as Shays' Rebellion under the Articles of Confederation, the founding generation agreed that a standing army was necessary for the safety of the Union, but they disagreed on how it would be governed. At the Constitutional Convention, Article 1, Section 8's clauses 11 through 18 gave Congress various military powers, such as declaring war, raising and supporting an army, and building military infrastructure.
However, the Anti-Federalists, driven by historical precedents of military dictators, rallied against a large standing army. Brutus claimed that it is indeed impossible that the liberties of the people in any country can be preserved where a numerous standing army is kept up. They argued for a force dependent upon state militias, which would prevent despotism and avoid massive costs. On the opposing side, Federalists such as James Madison asserted that a larger, well-trained army, capable of acting without state militias, was crucial, and that if Congress be not invested with this power, any powerful nation will be invited to attack us. Yet these concerns are less relevant today, as it was not until during World War II, when the size of the United States military increased to over 11 million troops, that the modern American standing army was born.
President Eisenhower's dire warnings of an informal alliance between the military and defense industries were insightful then and still are today. Following the Second World War, the American economy didn't convert back to pre-war norms. Rather, what Eisenhower called a permanent armament industry of vast proportions emerged. The Cold War and threats of nuclear attacks kept both defense spending and the standing army large and powerful, thus increasing the political force wielded by the military-industrial complex. This limited the effectiveness of Congress's Article 1, Section 8 authority to raise and support a military, as well as the President's Article 2, Section 2 role as Commander-in-Chief. In short, Eisenhower saw the military-industrial complex as a danger to our democratic form of government.
The fear of misplaced power that he describes in his 1961 farewell address is still one we must take seriously today. With an annual budget of around $622 billion, the Department of Defense works closely with companies like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman to create the most advanced machinery in the world. For example, the United States military has purchased almost 400 F-35 aircraft, each valued at around $110 million. To put it in perspective, the price of one F-35 could build 3 high schools. The military and the arms industry working so closely is a slippery slope towards complete autonomy from civilian oversight, as these unelected leaders sway policy decisions regarding defense.
In these policy decisions, the U.S. armed forces should avoid unilateral action and occupation of other nations, except in cases of egregious human rights violations. Oftentimes, costly occupation generates resistance from other nations, leading to more violence. Military occupation also greatly reduces the possibility of the host nation to regain collective self-determination once we remove our armed forces. Our occupation in Iraq, for example, led to the deaths of over 4,000 troops and added trillions to the U.S. debt, yet fighting still continues today. The consequences of occupation can compromise our military's efforts, and therefore unilateral military involvement should be avoided except in extreme circumstances.
However, we should continue to work with Asian and European allies to launch multilateral networks to deter international problems. These mutual defense efforts allow us to gain foreign intelligence and train side by side with allied nations. With this greater political force, we can use diplomatic methods to protect human rights and to address urgent issues like education and global health.
As Eisenhower once said, we want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. Therefore, it is necessary for the US to take action with allies to protect human dignity around the world and prevent encroachment upon democratic values by the military-industrial complex.
All right, thank you. So my question here is, it seems you are presenting that for the protection of democracy, we need some control or a kind of control over the military. The question is, our military is often used to spread democracy around the world. So aren't we, by doing that, not only protecting our own democracy, but ensuring that other countries are spreading, are participating or are receiving democracy that as we envision it?
Definitely some of our actions are greatly beneficial for democracy in other countries, such as our National Guard that actually goes in and teaches farmers how to use their soil to the best of its ability. But I think we look more towards our occupation of other host nations and how that creates greater political resistance within the nation, in which our military is actually overstepping and causing more problems.
I think we can look to the invasion of Iraq in 2002 for an example here. So after we toppled the government of Saddam Hussein, I think we caused widespread chaos and increased levels of unemployment in the nation, resulting in the rise of terrorist groups such as ISIL. And so I think that we can see that necessarily military action has not necessarily been the best for building democratic regimes. So I'd actually disagree with my colleague there.
I will say, though, we do have to look to provisions like the UN Declaration on Human Rights and the responsibility to protect passed after the 1994 Rwandan genocide. It was passed in 2005. We should use those provisions from the UN to dictate when it is our duty to intervene in certain international matters to promote that democracy.
So if I heard correctly, your testimony is that the United States government should avoid military intervention or presence, quote, in extreme, unless it's extreme circumstances. And I think we can probably agree extreme circumstances might be, well, you know, where they're attacking an ally or they're attacking us, or maybe even a genocide. What about the less extreme circumstances? For example, let's say they want to blockade the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, which we've seen recently can tremendously affect economic issues worldwide. So what about those less extreme circumstances? Is it okay to use military intervention and presence in those circumstances?
So I think we can go back to the responsibility to protect doctrine that my colleague was discussing, that was ratified as part of our sign on to the UN treaty under Article 2, Section 2, that the second pillar of that doctrine is intending to resolve all disputes with diplomacy if possible. So I think we can see under Article 2, Section 3 that our president has overt abilities in order to sort of gin up international goodwill. So, for example, one country is malevolently seeking to block all global trade by, as you gave the example, blocking the Suez Canal. It's necessary that we work with our allies that have significant shares of the global trade economy, for example, France and Great Britain, in order to prevent that blockade and isolate them through diplomatic measures in order to de-escalate the situation.
I would actually kind of disagree in this scenario. I think actually disagreeing with my paper in general, occupation to some extent can be beneficial. For example, Biden has announced that he is withdrawing troops from Afghanistan in the last week. But I think it may be important to keep some troops there to maybe build some civic society building and invest more economically. But there still should be troops there to protect the vulnerability of the Afghanistan government from the Taliban.
So I'd like to bring it back into a domestic direction. We've talked a lot about the international dimensions here. There are ethics concerns that you brought up with sort of the revolving door between the government and military defense companies. And similarly, you said that Congress's Article 1 war powers are limited by the influence of the military industry. So what solutions do you have? Do we need to have any further safeguards in place or change any of our laws in order to limit the potential for abuse there? And what would those solutions be?
We can definitely look towards Theodore Roosevelt's idea of using the bully pulpit, and Eisenhower actually addressed this in his farewell address and using alert and knowledgeable civic citizens to kind of prevent these congressmen from gaining this power that they then abuse that promotes the military-industrial complex.
Furthermore, a lot of these defense industries like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon contribute over $5 million to political campaigns through a sort of soft money donations, and that influences Congresspeople, since a lot of these Congresspeople have the ability to appropriate funds to the Army through Article 1, Section 8 Army Appropriations Clause. So actually also 81% of citizens say that a constitutional amendment regulating campaigns finance would be important, and that could help this cause a little bit.
I think that we can see, in addition, that just force with that informed citizenry, calling upon our congressmen to actually oversee the Pentagon effectively, using those Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 powers of investigation and oversight. We can require that the Pentagon issue audits every year, because in reality, the Department of Defense is the only department of the US government that has not successfully passed a clean audit in the past 2 decades. And so they've lost billions of dollars in accounting oversights. And so enforcing that Article 1, Section 9 power of requiring that they report their budgetary concerns to Congress would really help shore up and protect against that military-industrial complex.
Right, thank you. So it seems a lot of the proposed solutions and the safeguarding of democracy depend on informed citizenry. And in here in the US, it is really hard to say anything negative about the military because you're seen as unpatriotic. How would you reconcile those two? So we have an informed citizenry that will ensure that the military is not going overboard. And also, how would you calculate into that put in pressure either by the citizens or, obviously by the citizens to make sure that the budget of the military is controlled?
So to answer the first part of your question, I think to have this informed citizenry, we need to make sure there's open dialogue, especially using the First Amendment Free Press Clause. There needs to be this open channel of information, and there's no secrecy involved with military, so citizens can make an informed decision on the impacts of the military industrial complex.
I think furthermore, we can see that the use of the presidential power of the bully pulpit under Article 2, Section 4, by the president would really help and seek to demonstrate and better educate our citizenry, because ultimately, as the commander-in-chief of our armed forces under Article 2, Section 2, we must hold our president accountable for those actions. So I think we can see with instances such as the Pentagon Papers and the lack of responsibility for the Vietnam War that was not effectively occurring. So when we had that supreme leader of our armed forces actually taking responsibility for those actions, I think that'll help lead the American people in the right direction.
In our time of hyper-partisanship in this modern era, I think it's also important to recognize that congressmen and women on both political parties are being influenced by the military-industrial complex, and educating our citizens to ensure that it's not becoming a partisan issue of supporting the military or not is really important.
So let me ask you, I don't think we have a lot of time, but how the average citizen doesn't have the same money that the military Lockheed, et cetera, has to lobby. What can the average citizen do?
So I think the easiest thing that the average citizen can do is vote. So Article 1, Section 2, we have to recycle our elected officials.
Sorry, that is time.
All right, thank you.
All right, great presentation, guys. Your opening statement was, the judges will give you some feedback now, and starting with, I thought your presentation was strong. You all participated really well together, and you supplemented what your colleagues were saying. So you didn't repeat a lot of things, but you added additional information. You definitely used a lot of historical and constitutional examples, and not only in opening statement, but throughout your answers. So that was really good. I think overall very solid presentation. So great work.
I enjoyed your presentation. I quite frankly, having experience, I expect nothing less from Maggie Walker. So I have to tell you that I'm kind of cynical when it comes to the power of the average citizen versus the lobbying power of Lockheed, Boeing, all those big military arms companies. However, I think you hit on something that's really important. And when you said that the cost of one F-35 equals the cost of 3 high schools, I think that's the kind of language, that's the kind of comparison, that's the kind of highlights that can be brought to the American public, the American citizen. And I think that that would be something that I'm going to rely on you to bring those kinds of examples to the average American citizen, so they realize that, wow, we're spending billions of dollars on these planes. Just one plane, one less plane, we could have 3 high schools. 10 less planes, we could have 30 high schools. I mean, I think that's a brilliant idea. I really applaud you for bringing that kind of information down to the plain language that the average American citizen would understand. So I have every confidence that you will continue to do that kind of analysis and presentation, and it makes me feel good. Thank you very much.
So I echo everything that my fellow judges said. Something that was most impressive to me was that at every step of the way, you were making a coherent argument. And so, you clearly stated the point you were making, and then you used both history and the text of the Constitution itself to defend that. And then you often went another step further to show how that has actually played out, like with the example of the Pentagon Papers, or when you named specific oversight authorities that Congress has, but has not necessarily been using. That shows a depth of understanding that I really appreciated as a judge. On the other hand, sometimes I felt like you were so focused on making sure you named as many specific examples or, certain facts about exactly when something happened or what have you. And in speaking so fast to try to get that out, that can end up sort of undermining it a little bit, because it can make it a bit harder for me to follow. So, you all are solid. And there's a point of diminishing returns, basically. So just always try to think about that. Like, where is adding another detail or another specific reference actually helping, versus when do you want to, let what you've already said really speak for itself. So yeah, I'm excited about the future of Virginia and the future of this country with you all as leaders in it. So great work. You should feel really good about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for judging us. Yeah.
Thank you for taking a long weekend to judge these camps. I know they appreciate it.